My name's Paul English. I'm from Swansea in South Wales. It's where I sailed on the Sir Winston Churchill for the first time when I was 22, which is early 1979. Sir Winston Churchill first. I sailed on her most often actually, and she was coming in to do a week's maintenance in Swansea, and in the docks was my Venture Scout unit, which I was running, and I was asked by one of the people who was on the local committee if we could help out with finding some space to lay out sails for repair. So we helped arrange that in the old fish market, and I provided the labour when they came in to offload the sails from the Venture Scouts that I worked with, and chatted to the bosun and various different people, and at the end of the week of maintenance they were setting up for the next trip, no short of a bosun's mate. So I was asked if I'd like to do the trip, so I agreed. It was something I'd planned to do previously, and then various things worked against it, so I thought it'd be right, I'll actually achieve my ambition of sailing on board the ship now. I joined on the Saturday for a trip that was joining on the Sunday, and by the Sunday morning a watch leader had failed to turn up, so I was made in a watch leader. So I did my first trip on Sir Winston Churchill as a watch leader, not having sailed before. It's a bit of a steep learning curve, but enjoyed it to the extent that not only did I do that 2-week trip, but I did another 2-week trip and a week in as well at the other end. So I actually did 6 weeks on board straight off. It was quite an exciting trip as well. It was quite rough, quite bad weather.
Where was it to?
It was from Swansea, and we went up to, I believe that was up to the Western Isles. No, it was up to Liverpool the first stage. And the second trip that I did, also as a watch leader, was quite an interesting one. It's quite a famous one. We ran aground, running into a port in southern Brittany. We actually didn't run aground on a rock or a charted object, but it was a fishing boat that had sunk right on the edge of the channel, and we managed to run right over the top of it. So we leaked quite a lot. We went in and got some assistance from the local fire brigade to pump out the anchor locker, and divers came and put a temporary patch on the outside of the hull. We built a cement box inside, restowed the anchor cable, and went off for proper repairs at Brest. The weather got up on the way to Brest. 2 French naval ships and an American naval ship crashed into each other, so they took up all the dry docking space in Brest, so we diverted, but the weather got so bad that the patch came away, so we leaked quite a lot again. So we went and actually dried out to Sir Winston Churchill in St Peter Port Harbour, which is the first time they've done that. Not quite the hull shape to do that as a normal thing, so that we could get welding repairs ready. So it was that was quite an interesting trip as well. And that was Liverpool to Southampton. So that was my second trip. So the first one was quite a bit of bad weather, but good fun. And then the second one was little bits of bad weather in odd places. But the trip's famous because we'd finally secured the cable locker when we were leaking. We cut the dinghy mast and bracketed over the anchor locker hatch. And one of the watch officers coming forward to pass a message on, he said he wouldn't come down through the accommodation, which was also part flooded. He came over the deck, and the hatch that we'd just pulled down on top of the dinghy mast to brace the anchor locker hatch down to stop the ship flooding was opened by this watch officer, where the whole contraption that we just spent about 6 hours building fell apart. So the air was a little bit blue, especially from the bosun's point of view. We nearly sunk. We were very close. We were pumping, don't know whether you remember on the Churchill and others, there used to be 2 big brass plates in the deck just either side of the bridge.
Okay.
They were built in as emergency manual pumps, and that's their only ever recorded real use. They were tested once a year, and then other than that they were used, but they were used for 14-15 hours on the way into St Peter Port. uh, constantly pumping. So mechanical pumping, electrical pumping a lot. Yeah, it was close. It was. I sometimes ask after that trip why I went back. It's just, it was wild, but it was a great trip in all sorts of ways. There were some other really strange incidents on that trip as well. But some of those, I don't know. Certainly better not mention any names, otherwise we could be liable. Yeah. It was. I suppose one of the reasons they decided to move me to watch leader rather than bosun's mate is I had a background. I was 22, 22-ish, I think.
I don't know. Carry on.
Yeah, I was 22, 23-ish, but I was already a scout leader and an adventure scout leader.
Right.
So I had a bit of experience with organising people, and the basic thing that a watch leader does is actually organise people. My sailing experience was through, it was a Venture Sea Scout unit, so I had sailing experience in odd-shaped, odd-rigged boats from them. So that's what it was all about, really. It was, and it's organising. If you make a little rota out of what people are doing, get them to the right place at the right time, you can succeed as a watch leader. If you know a bit about the sailing, that helps a lot. And if you knew a reasonable amount about the sailing, then the job's actually easy. It's just, a slightly bigger rig than you used to.
Yeah. So how old were you on that voyage?
That was, I think I must have been 22.
Okay.
Thinking about which year it was, yes. Yeah, it would have been 22.
Right.
Which is quite old to start. And I'd sailed since I was 12, and I had experience of some bigger ship stuff as well. So it wasn't a huge shock. I was just thrilled to be there, so I just threw myself into it and rushed about. And as I said, other things were happening as well, which was good because some later trips that I did, where the conditions on the trip were easier, it was more difficult to control the crew that you had. Whereas, because there were external pressures, and people could actually see, well, if we don't do this, we could be in a lot of trouble here. Then it was, let's get this done now. And it was, everybody pitched in. Everybody worked really hard. It was probably a better exercise in team building and getting people to work together by having a few little things go wrong than it would have been if it was just a nice, calm, sunny trip. Yeah, it's probably the best bit of being a watch leader actually is if you get people that you might find that people being reticent when they start off to come forward and join in, or some people just don't want to join in because we used to get quite a lot of people who were sent rather than volunteered to come. And the change in attitude was good. As I say, the first trips, because of the pressures, it was better. You saw a better change. And in fact, some of the people who responded their best out of the crew on that particular trip, we had 4 young Glaswegian kids that had been sent along, and the change in them was remarkable. Because all they wanted to do when they came on board to start off with was disappear to have a smoke. And by the time we got towards the end of the trip, a bit of an odd response, but there was a guy who'd been sent from the Civil Service Commission as part of their rapid acceleration program. We used to write reports at the end of a trip, quite detailed reports, and we actually ended up, he was in the same watch with these Glaswegians, and for captain's inspection on the last day, these Glaswegians had pitched in really hard and had everything shining, and they caught the guy lying down in his bunk when he was meant to be cleaning the area we were cleaning. So they physically forced him to clean up the heads he was meant to be cleaning, covering him in bleach and using it to scrub the deck. But they wanted to have the best area on the ship. You know, they wanted the award for the best area, and there was somebody in the team not pulling his weight, and they were really very aggrieved about that. Miraculous change in them, and I've seen it with all sorts of people much later on. I did a much later trip as a watch officer, which just immediately comes to mind for a change. It was a girls' trip. We were in the Western Isles. It was nice and calm, and we had a girl called Mary who had been brought up on a remote, a family were English, but they'd moved to Croft on a remote Scottish island where there was nobody else, and she'd been homeschooled. She'd never had any interaction with other youngsters of her own age. She was 17 and about to go. Yeah, we let them go past, all singing and dancing. Yeah, she was a 17-year-old girl, passed her A-levels or whatever, or highest as they were then in Scotland, early, had been accepted at any university she'd applied to because she'd passed so well, but had no experience of the wide world at all. And her uncle got her on the trip to try and sort of introduce her to living with other young people while she was in a mess, you know, messing with the whole of her watch, 13 people. And I was a watch officer, and very strange. We had a really good wide mix of people, but she was very sort of nervous of joining anything in. And I was handing a sail, and I put her in charge of the halyard, it was the main gaff, peak halyard. And I said, right, Mary, when I say let go, I want you to let go. And we'd found that she would take everything very literally. And so in the literal world, when I said let go, she actually threw all the turns off the pin. Down came the peak with a huge crash, broke the slings and everything else. George Thorpe, who was bosun at the time, was looking at me. And he came up and he was watching. I'm thinking, I'm going to get the most almighty bollocking. I just want to sort of shock her out of this doing everything literally sense. Yeah. And George came up, he said, that was a sly way of doing that. I just walked off. It was really funny. And he perfectly understood what I was trying to do. And it shocked the girl out of her, you know. And then after that, she would talk more, because you couldn't get her to talk even. She would just do anything she was told. Absolutely anything. Absolutely literally. But after that, she would also become a little bit more careful. I was in touch with her for quite a few years after that. She was, but yeah, another big change in someone. That's probably another enormous change from her background to where she ended up at just the end of 2 weeks, you know. Yeah. A shock introduction to life. I mean, there were odd things like the watch leader, you know, female watch leader living in the mess deck, where they say, well, she won't change in front of anybody else. She won't, you know, she's incredibly shy. She won't go in the showers. You know, she sneaks around at night. She changes under a blanket. And at the end of it, she was sort of, I wouldn't say at the same sort of level of interaction as everybody else on board, but much better, much better. And all credit to the uncle, whoever he was, for realising that and sponsoring her to go. You know, nice little trip around the Western Isles. Yeah, did well.
Cool.
George, of course, made me repair all the damage. No, it was that night after I was supposed to be off watch. It will be fixed by the morning, won't it? But yeah, okay. It was just a stupid idea that came into my head at the time. Yeah. When I first sailed, I was working ashore, and I tried to go to sea professionally previously to that. But it was at a time when there was an enormous downturn in the shipping industry, so there was nothing there. So I worked ashore, logistics and transport stuff, and was doing quite well at it. But when I worked for project jobs doing that, I used to get the equivalent of time off in lieu. So I would get long periods of time off, and I started to do more and more sailing. So I sailed yachts and things as well, and whenever June in the STA office rang up and said, I've got a space for a couple of weeks, and it matched up with the time when I was coming to the end of a project perhaps, and could say, yes, I've got to use up all my leave, so I'll go. So June used to use me as a sort of, right, I've got this space. It may not be what you wanted to do, but would you like to come along? Are you available? So I used to get phone calls a lot. And it worked for a while. And then the way, so I sailed a lot in 80 to about 83 or 84. I probably did at least 10 or, yeah, I probably did at least 10 or 12 weeks a year. All the way through, whenever they were short of anything really. Mostly watch leader, bosun's mate, watch officer I started doing as well, and then I started also covering cook's assistant, which is where I met Wendy Jones, Wendy Allison, we'll talk to later, and a few others. Then the job changed and I was told I could only take the normal designated amount of 4 weeks leave a year, and I'd have to have the rest paid as overtime in cash, which the first time they did that I got taxed so far into the ground. I swore it wasn't worth doing the work, and so I gave that up and went into boats and sailing full time. So I was sailing smaller boats, I did delivery work and other bits and pieces, and kept my hand in, or whenever there wasn't work, because I was self-employed, I'd work for STA Schooners, so I started being employed by them as well on occasions. So I did refit 85, 86 as refit hand in charge of both the boats at shore. A certain Chinese gentleman, I was actually on board from, I think it was the longest it was ever on board, from July of, the end of July of 85, without break until April of 86, apart from the 4 days over Christmas where Mr. Chan relieved me as babysitting the boats in showroom. And in that time I sailed as just about everything, including looking after the engines during the weekend, doing the cooking for another weekend, cook's assistant, bosun, bosun's mate, watch leader, watch officer and navigator. So I got quite a bit. I also did, funny enough, it wasn't until 84 that I sailed on the Malcolm Miller for the first time. So I sailed on Malcolm Miller's 84, and I didn't go back there. I sailed as watch leader on the first trip I did, which of course was no different really than layout, but I didn't sail on there again until I sailed there as bosun in 86. Then I had a month away, and then did the whole tall ships. After that I went back to in between the two bits I'd done a little bit with commissioning a private yacht. I went back to skipper that for a year, and that's when I sort of drifted away from STA. When I came back I actually ended up working for Ocean Youth Club. I was just offered a job out of the blue, so stayed with sail training with them, then went and did some more commercial work for about 6 months, got bored with that. So after 4 years with Ocean Youth Club, I did 6 months in the commercial industry, then 4 years with the Jubilee Sailing Trust, but then I started having family, and charity jobs don't really give you quite enough money to live on when you start having family. So I had to go back into the commercial stuff, but I kept doing reliefs up until 2000 with different organisations. So my last trip with the schooners was just before she was decommissioned. I sailed on her last but one trip as chief officer on a Miller. Okay. My involvement now, this is the first time since probably that I haven't sailed much since then. Too busy doing the commercial work, pay for children as they're growing up, college, etc. Still paying for children, even though they've left college and things. So I actually teach maritime operations now, but between 2000 and 2009-10 it was all commercial marine industry stuff, and so busy that I had to use the holidays for the family. So I couldn't say, well, I really want to go sailing for a week. So the last actual sailing I did was 2001, I think, for Ocean Youth Trust, as it's become now.
Right.
So the chance to get involved with the tall ships up here, because it's just up the road from where I'm working now, couldn't pass it up. Yeah, the only other time I've worked on cruise ships for a while, and we're down Southern Ocean, south of New Zealand, actually coming round from southern New Zealand to run across to Tasmania, but in the very open bit, and without the proper weather warning, we suddenly encountered some really bad weather, and the ship's photographer was trying to take photographs from the bridge. I wanted to go out on the open bridge with him, and I wouldn't let him go because you could see it was really building, and we took a couple of seas that actually broke over the bridge, and he was trying to get a photograph of the wave breaking over the bridge, and he looked at them afterwards and he said, oh, there's a bit of spray coming up, you know. It didn't really look good, but we did get one photograph where the bow is just burying itself. Yeah. And you can see the amount of water that's being shifted aside as the wave breaks just under the curve of the bow. And you can also see a bit of the bow actually physically bending backwards with the force of the sea. And that was a 46,000 ton ship, and it showed you that, yeah, there's a bit of power there. That worked, but yeah, I think modern cameras show it much better. I saw some pictures somebody on the tall ships race had done of a fairly calm day, but with still quite a big swell, yeah, and dolphins around the boat, so they're showing from different angles and, you know, going down, etc. And you can actually see how much the swell is moving against the horizon, although it's fairly flat and they're only drifting along.
When it breaks the horizon, that's when
you can see, yeah, you can start saying, oh, that's quite a big swell still out there. It was I think that was the Lisbon to Cadiz leg. Right. So there wasn't much wind, but there was still quite a big ocean swell there. Right. And you could actually see that. It's nice that the technology can capture it now, because try to explain it to people who've never sailed anything. Oh, well, it doesn't get very rough, does it now? Oh, okay. It was a lot worse than that. Yeah, a couple of the permanent crew. I went to last year's schooner reunion, so I was in touch with a few people there, and I was there the year before, and yeah, I've sort of got in touch with a few people since then. I was in touch with a few after that. Several have obviously sailed on other ships that I've sailed on as well, either with Jubilee Sailing Trust or with the Ocean Youth Club, which was afterwards. And there are quite a lot of permanent crew who I'm still in touch with. But it's the Facebook thing now. You know, you send little things on Facebook, or they post something on Facebook, and that's it. Close to, of course, at my age, a lot of the people have either disappeared through long inactivity, because several of us are. And maybe a thing of seafarers that I found we're probably slightly worse than other people. We don't think, oh well, it's 4 or 5 months since I've spoken to them, and you suddenly walk into somebody and take a conversation as if it's, you know, if it's the next day, and quite used to that sort of thing. And whereas other people take umbrage if you don't send them a letter or a text or give them a phone call for 6 months or so. So yeah, a lot of people have drifted away, but probably, I don't know, just contact 20, 30 people from those days. Actual friends, 3 or 4 good friends. And unfortunately some have passed away, of course, some of the people I was really close to, like Gil Dippy, for instance, and various others have gone. Yeah, I think it became a bit of a problem. I was in, then I was out, and sort of lost touch with people during my private yachting days, you know, sailing other people's yachts. It was very difficult at the time, because it was before most mobile phones, and it was link calls and stupid things from the ship where you had to go through radio stations, so you didn't communicate with people a lot. Then I came back and went into a different sailing organisation, and came across one or two people that I'd come across before, and I would still see the people who were the permanent crew on board, but some of the, you know, the normal trainees, etc., I'd lose touch with. And then go into yet another sailing organisation, and some of the people from all three, funny enough, you know, people crop up in all these organisations. So those are more likely to be the ones. And the other thing is that trying to place people, some people who've been close to on a voyage, one particular trip, they may only ever have done that voyage, and they remember you, but you look at them when they come back and think, oh Lord, right, which ship was it on? When was it? Who is it? How do they know my name? And then you think, okay, well, they've sailed with me a couple of times. I bumped into somebody on Lord Nelson and didn't recognise them at first, because obviously people age, and it's probably 12 years since I've seen her. But I sailed with her several times. I almost didn't recognise her. And then other people, you know, don't realise that you've probably sailed with a couple of thousand people.
Yeah.
And trying to place every single person from every single trip is just not a physical possibility. I have problems remembering sometimes what was happening last week, let alone, you know, talking about 20, 25 years ago plus. So yeah, but yeah, there's a few. There's I mean, not regular contact, but we still Facebook with a guy who was a watch leader on us, on the Malcolm Miller once, and the Churchill once, and a few other people. But then a lot of them have spread out all over the world as well. Yeah, there's a few. Personal development wise, probably confidence. And you know, the second trip things were easier. Much later on things were much easier. You could get back into, say, you know, yes, all right, I know where all the rig is, go and have a few pulls, and say it's there. But that gave the background confidence once you had that little bit of knowledge. That made that bit of the job, the bit that some people found hard, easy, and you could concentrate more on what was going on with the actual people that were there. You know, that was good, but it built my confidence quite a lot. I was possibly slightly introverted when it first started. I was used to relying on myself rather than, you know, working with a team, and that was developed. But then trying to match and control different personalities and different people, which I'm still learning how to do that, but it was given a big boost by working on a ship, so the teamwork side, and just trying to get on with people. Yeah. So it's the same. It's definitely the same thing that the trainees get out of it. That it's an enforced, enclosed environment where you're either going to get on or you're going to rub everybody up the wrong way, and it's the peer pressure that I won't say it makes people conform, but it makes them realise that they have to get on with other people, they have to work with them, and that's, yeah, it's the best thing about sail training, really. By the end of the 4 weeks of sailing that I was involved with, there was the week of the maintenance work first, which I joined in with, and seeing how people who'd volunteered to give up holiday would turn up to work really, really, really hard for no payment at all. And it's, well, they must have got something out of this. This is interesting. And then after the 4 weeks of sailing, seeing what people had got out of it, and you know, again, some of those people came back quite a lot afterwards, and the change in them as well. Yeah, it's wonderful. I cannot explain really the experience that you get once you've done this and you see all these changes in people and in yourself and how it develops. It's just, yeah, it's probably one of the best things I've ever done. There are benefits for having worked with very young people with Ocean Youth Club. Excuse me. There are certainly benefits at even pre-teen years. Probably 12, I would say, is the minimum. After they've had, in our schooling system at least, after they've made the break and gone from primary school to senior school, settle down there for a year, which is normally a bigger environment. Short trips, sail training, very useful. Smaller vessels, but still a large-ish group of people. The Ocean Youth Club model was good, 12 youngsters on board, but in a reasonably sort of sheltered environment. 14, 15 and upwards, then you need to be not just going out of sight of land now and again, but longer trips, slightly bigger, slightly harder to work. Needing a full team to work to make it the machine itself work is a good thing. Not a big fan of mechanical assistance and winches and things. You know, it's got to be designed so there's lots of people pulling. That's what it's all about. And what they get from that is, as well as the teamwork and all the rest of it, they get self-reliance and build up their self-confidence. You know, they become perhaps aware or more aware of themselves. And if they're stretched and pushed a lot, then it can actually give them a bit of confidence in their ability to cope, because I find a lot of teenagers nowadays are actually immensely concerned about whether they're going to actually survive in the big bad world or not, and are not given in the education system much of a chance to develop those skills. And it's, you know, it would be a good thing for quite a lot of them to go on some sort of sail training or become involved in the environment, so that they can see that yes, you can cope. You can cope with new things and adapt. It all depends what job you're doing. It really does. It can be the captain on occasions, but it's only on occasions. If you're bosun's mate, it's the bosun, without a doubt. You know, you are working for and on behalf of the bosun, and you need to listen to his every word and understand what he's actually meaning. If you're working as a cook's assistant, then it's the chef. And then if you're just a trainee or somebody doing something else, it depends what time of day it is. You know, captain for inspections and things, perhaps. Bosun when you're actually playing about with the sails, so you don't do it wrong, or you can get some help and advice. And whenever you need to eat, you need to be really nice to the chef, not tip the ship up. You know, you can be watch officer or chief officer, and you suddenly decide to do something really mad, like tack before you collide with something, but it happens to be just as the chef's serving food. You can get into a lot of trouble doing that. If food suddenly becomes almost inedible on every single meal, they can even manage to spoil your cornflakes in the morning. So, for survival purposes, the chef.